all the game birds that have been introduced to North America, the ring-necked pheasant has captured the hearts of more upland hunters than all other species. From its origins in China, this elegant yet rugged game bird has found its way around the globe, but nowhere has its introduction been more successful than on the Great Plains of North America. When they were introduced to Colorado in 1894, the ringneck soon flourished on cultivated lands they found on both sides of the Continental Divide. While populations exist today in many locations across the state, the highest densities by far are centered around the cultivated croplands of northeastern and eastern Colorado. All ringneck pheasant populations in Colorado are wild and self-sustaining. The Colorado Division of Wildlife manages the populations only through hunting regulations and the preservation of their habitat. Now is a good time for hunting pheasants in Colorado. Public access has never been better, and a pheasant hunter's chances for success are higher than ever before. Public pheasant hunting opportunities in Colorado took a giant step forward in 2001. That's when the Division of Wildlife launched the Walk-In Access Program. Initially, the Walk-In program leased 113,000 acres of prime pheasant habitat from landowners and opened it all to public hunting. The program was an immediate success, and it expanded each year until the number of acres had doubled, reaching 226,000 acres in 2007. That amounts to roughly 343 square miles of private land made available for public hunting. While pheasant hunting remains the prime objective, the walk-in program has expanded to include hunting opportunities for mourning doves, scaled quail, and waterfowl. At the heart of the program is the Walk-In Atlas, the annual guide to enrolled properties. It's all here: the regulations, hunting information, and county maps of the properties. But how do you go about selecting a place to hunt with such a large assortment of yellow squares to consider? The task is not as overwhelming as it first appears. Each of the properties is coded according to the type of habitat. A basic understanding of the various habitats and how they relate to a pheasant's daily routine will help you choose a location, a hunting technique, and the best time of day to hunt there. Pheasants wake up hungry. At first light, they leave their night roost area to feed in nearby crop fields. After feeding, they leave the crop and move to heavy overhead cover, where they will spend the day loafing or day roosting. In the late afternoon, they go out and feed again before returning to their night roosting area at sunset. If you plan to hunt on opening day, a pre-season scouting trip is the best thing you can do to boost your chances for a successful hunt. After a good scouting trip, you will know exactly where to start the day and where to go as the day progresses. Just grab a copy of the Walk-In Atlas and a road map and head out on a fact-finding mission in pheasant country. A day trip is fine, but if possible, spend a night on the plains. Small towns welcome pheasant hunters, and staying over puts you in the area for prime time scouting at dusk and dawn. Unless you know what to look for, your scouting trip could end up as just a drive in the country. Aside from the obvious goal of spotting pheasants, You will need to analyze the type of habitat at each location and make notes in the atlas or in a notebook. First are the G's, by far the most numerous letter on the maps. G stands for grass, and these are croplands that have been taken out of cultivation and enrolled in the Conservation Reserve Program, a federal program to restore native grasslands. CRP fields rank high among the most desirable habitats available to pheasants. However, the quality of the cover and the number of pheasants that a field harbors can vary greatly. Young fields of CRP, those that have been in the program for less than 3 years, are prime habitat for pheasants. When cultivation ends, the field is soon taken over by tall, invasive annual weeds. Here to explain the value of young CRP is Division of Wildlife Small Game Coordinator and Walk-In Program Administrator, Ed Gorman.
This is second year CRP. This particular field is still dominated by kochia and annual sunflower, which makes it tremendously valuable to pheasants. This field in particular is a sprinkler corner, 14 acres in size, immediately adjacent to excellent corn stubble. This spot right now is as productive as it's going to be for pheasants. In 3 to 4 years, it will turn into tall switchgrass and Indian grass. Still excellent habitat, but right now it's as productive as it's ever going to be.
When scouting any grass field, look for adjacent food sources, such as fields of corn or wheat stubble. Even the tallest grass won't hold pheasants if food is not nearby.
Proximity of habitats are a vitally important factor in pheasant populations and also a great place to hunt. In this particular setting, you have tall grass CRP that is not quite filled in with grass. There's still a good annual weed component within. Immediately across the road, you have corn stubble for foraging habitat, and you also have trees and shrubs, vitally important during periods of bad weather. All three combine to make this an ideal spot for pheasants and a good place for people to hunt.
Young CRP is a good choice for a small hunting party, such as a father and daughter with a Springer Spaniel. Here, the hunters have chosen a tall grass corner bordering a cornfield. Hunting in high winds may not make for the most pleasant of conditions, but hunters can use the wind to their advantage. Always hunt into the wind whenever possible, especially high wind. The wind direction allows the hunters to enter the field from the opposite end and push it toward the road. Dry weeds rustling in the wind covers other sounds, and a hunting dog gains a slight edge if a pheasant doesn't hear him coming. As a CRP field ages, short native grasses eventually push out the taller annual weeds that sprang up when cultivation ended. This is the second phase of CRP, Ed Gorman explains.
This is low quality CRP. The grasses are composed mostly of smooth brome grass and Cytos grama. In the right area, this stuff is used as night roosting habitat, particularly early in the season when birds don't need to be in thick cover. You can find some birds in this probably early in the season, November. Late in the season they don't use this stuff. They're too exposed to predators and too exposed to the elements of weather.
Third and final stage for CRP is the mature stage. Mature CRP fields are identified by a mixture of both short and tall native grasses, such as red switchgrass and yellow Indian grass. These fields are excellent places to hunt, especially during the late morning and early afternoon.
This spot really has it all for both pheasants and hunters. Tremendous cover, great nesting habitat, great place for pheasants to spend a cold winter day, and yet at the same time it offers a spot where large parties can hunt and cover the field effectively. It also is an excellent place for 1 or 2 hunters and a dog to hunt, simply because the birds do not want to leave this type of habitat. Small parties can cover it very effectively by hunting it slowly, letting the dog do all the work, and large parties as well can cover most of the escape angles.
While an expanse of tall grass, such as a large circle corner, may appear to be too much for a single hunter and a flushing dog to tackle, the opposite is true. Pheasants are so comfortable in this heavy cover, they are reluctant to leave it. The strategy here is simple. Just turn the dog loose and follow close behind. And early morning frost is good for a dog's nose. When the dog locks onto the hot scent of a running pheasant, the pace quickens, and the hunter must hustle to keep up. Be prepared for the pheasant to flush at any time, but more so when the chase ends the edge of the field. Following a black lab through tall cover all morning uses a lot of energy. A bit of rest and a bite to eat is time well spent. While tall grass circle corners are fine for a small party, expansive fields of mature CRP call for an entirely different strategy. Later in the season, pheasants find refuge in these large fields, and it can take a platoon of hunters to flush them out. Large party hunts are a tradition among many resident and visiting pheasant hunters in eastern Colorado. These hunts are well planned and well organized, and when the call goes out, hunters arrive from far and near. When everyone is ready, the group leader briefs the hunters on strategies and safety. A line of hunters and dogs will push the field toward the blockers posted at the opposite end. Orange clothing is a must with this many hunters afield. As the day progresses, the party moves to several other locations, which include a private field of standing milo. Where the tactics pay off at the end of the drive. W is for wheat. After a wheat field is harvested, the remaining stubble provides critical forage for pheasants in non-irrigated areas. These dryland crops can be the wild card in Colorado pheasant hunting.
Stripped wheat is harvested with a special combine header that strips the kernels of wheat off of the stalk as opposed to cutting the stalk and threshing the grain inside the combine. It's a real unique harvesting method that's becoming more and more common out east. What the benefit of stripped wheat is for pheasants is that the stubble remains much taller. Conventionally cut stubble might be 12 to 14 inches tall in a good year. Stripped wheat will be 24 to 28 inches tall. Tremendously better pheasant habitat.
When conditions are right, dryland wheat fields can support excellent numbers of pheasants. But when conditions are poor, populations decline quickly. Hunting large tracts of wheat stubble is generally unproductive for small hunting parties and best tackled by large, organized drives. In addition to tall stubble, large parties should seek out the so-called dirty wheat, where the field is sitting idle and weeds have been allowed to grow.
Wheat stubble fields are generally overlooked as pheasant hunting cover. They're big, they're kind of nondescript. Some important things to look for, however, because pheasants spend a significant amount of time in these fields. Look for the density of stubble, the thicker the better, and look for the height of the stubble. There is not a wheat field in Colorado that is too tall or too dense for pheasants to use. Conversely, thin wheat stubble or very short wheat stubble doesn't have as much value to pheasants. Generally speaking, rule of thumb, for every 5 inches in wheat stubble you can attain in a field or choose in your hunting field, pheasant abundance doubles. So 10-inch stubble would be about half as good as 15-inch tall wheat stubble, and conversely 20-inch stubble all that much better than 15-inch stubble. Another thing to look for, weed composition. If there are some annual weeds in the stubble, that's all the better. The thicker and better the hiding habitat is, the more pheasants will use the cover.
A quick flip through the county maps reveals only a few C's. C stands for corn, and while irrigated cornfields provide critical forage for pheasants, they usually provide poor hunting. Pheasants and corn stubble have a tremendous advantage over hunters. The wide rows allow them to detect hunters from long distances, and the wide rows provide unobstructed speed lanes for fast getaways.
This is tall irrigated corn stubble. As you can see, there's plenty of cover out here for birds to spend the day in, particularly in mild weather. Quite commonly when they're not in the heavy, thick cover nearby, they might be out in this type of habitat simply because there's an abundance of food out there and enough structural cover to hide the birds from predators.
Transition areas where center pivot corn irrigation mixes with dryland wheat production often produces our highest pheasant populations. Pheasants nest in the wheat fields, raise chicks and standing corn, and once the corn is harvested, the birds go back into nearby wheat stubble or CRP to roost, returning daily to forage in cornfields. If pivot corners are enhanced with tall CRP grass or food plots, pheasant densities can be amazing. Single hunters and small hunting parties with flushing or pointing dogs should pay attention to the other walk-in properties marked with O's. Other indicates various cover types for a variety of hunting opportunities, including creek beds, abandoned farmsteads, tree rows, and plum thickets. These places may hold pheasants anytime, but pheasants really pile up here during snowstorms and times of high winds and bad weather. A deep draw can be a hot spot for a single hunter and a flushing dog when the weather turns cold and rainy, especially when the draw is flanked by habitat improvements and food sources. Even in good weather, a brushy creek bed can hold a pheasant or two when it offers the best cover around. With tight cover interspersed with open ground, pheasants may hold tight enough for a dog, like an English setter, to set the birds long enough for a hunter to get into position. A row of trees packed with brush and tumbleweeds is a good scene for two hunters and a pair of German short-haired pointers. With a pair of high-powered dogs hot on its heels, a pheasant may sit tight to see if the dogs will run past, taking to the air when the dogs point out its mistake. When pushed to a choke point, such as this fence corner adjacent to sparse cover, a rooster may choose to sit tight, giving the dogs a chance to point and allowing the hunters to get into position. Pushing pheasants toward sparse cover also works. These hunters are letting a brace of wire-haired pointers follow a rooster's scent trail to the edge of a grassy corner. While the advantages of hunting behind a good dog are undeniable, hunters without dogs can do well. It just takes a bit more strategy. One good tactic is to change the direction that you hunt a field. Most hunters park in the same location and enter the field at the closest point. With such predictability by hunters, pheasants quickly learn a trusted escape route: out the back door. Take a wide walk around the field and go in at the back. Work the field pushing the birds back towards the road or toward thin cover, where they are more likely to hold and flush. Another effective tactic is to move slowly and change directions often, even stopping occasionally. Pheasants in heavy cover learn to sit tight and let fast-walking hunters pass by. By stopping and changing directions, the hunter confuses the bird, and if it doesn't know which way to run, it is more likely to flush. Hunters without dogs also should look for areas where the cover allows them to funnel the birds into a situation where they are forced to hold, and then flush when the hunters are in range. Tree rows and thickets surrounded by short grass are good prospects. Here, two hunters have spotted a good-looking patch of cover that happens to be on private land. Although many hunters are reluctant to knock on a landowner's door, your chances of getting permission are better than you may think. Introduce yourself and tell the landowner how many hunters are in your party and exactly where you would like to hunt. If you get permission, offer the landowner your name and license plate number and volunteer to check in after you hunt. Back at the location, the hunters examine the lay of the habitat and discuss their hunting strategy while getting geared up. plan here is to swing wide across open terrain and enter the tree row from the far end. This tactic will help prevent pheasants from escaping out the back. And then the hunters flank both sides of the trees and push toward the end of the row. Pheasants reluctant to run across open ground or thin cover will often hold tight, taking to the air at the last moment. The same principle applies to hunting low brush cover. Again, the hunters are trying to push the birds toward poor cover. Fresh tracks indicate a pheasant running ahead. With no safe place to run, the pheasant flushes.
Rooster!
While the abundance of pheasants and the overall quality of pheasant hunting in Colorado can vary from year to year, depending on the uncertainties of weather on the plains, the future of pheasant hunting stands on solid ground for this generation and for generations to come.
I'd like to have another chance at long ago, sitting next to you on that country road in your pickup truck on a Saturday night. That little yellow dress just above my knees, the windows rolled down, that sweet summer breeze, it took my breath away to see that full moon rise. It was the 21st day in the month of June, the longest day of summer. That big old moon took its own sweet time as we watched it climb and light the prairie skies where we grew up. You could see the whole world from your pickup truck. As far as the eyes of youth could see, there were endless skies, possibilities.